The NFL has some major problems right now, and I'm not talking about the drug use or the domestic abuse. No, I'm talking about the problem with concussions and other brain-related injuries of their players that seemed like they were sort of rare at one point, and now more and more evidence is piling up that this is a pervasive, systemic problem throughout the NFL for current players and past players.
Here comes the, y'all don't really want it like that. Yeah. Here comes the, no. Here comes the, oh. Here comes the, y'all don't really want it like that. Yeah. Here comes the, no. Here comes the, oh. Here comes the.
Boston University, where 90 out of 94 former NFL players had the debilitating brain disease chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Now, for years, the NFL has avoided saying whether or not football is related to CTE, saying instead that is up to the medical community to decide. And this is, though, as you mentioned, Rhiannon, a big, big admission.
There's a good jab on the face.
It's hard to imagine today, but about 100 years ago, boxing was one of the most popular sports in the US. More people went to some championship bouts than could fit into any NFL stadium today. But for boxing, it was all downhill from there. There are a lot of reasons why, but one of them is that a lot of people see the sport as barbaric because it causes brain damage.
After the most murderous beating a man ever took in the ring, and
after years of getting hit in the head, many boxers develop dementia and depression as part of a disease called dementia pugilistica. Nowadays, dementia pugilistica has a new name, CTE. And it's not just found in boxers, but in increasing numbers of football players, even causing some people to question the future of the NFL. So people have always known that playing tackle football causes injuries. Okay, I'm gonna play football and maybe I'm gonna break my legs. Maybe I won't be able to run when I'm 50. Players have known that forever, but what we didn't know is that playing tackle football can cause really long-term brain injuries. There's something a lot less sad about a 50-year-old who can't run versus a 50-year-old who can't think.
The things we do to one another, okay? Hell, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just tired and confused right now. That's why I say I can't say it the way I want to say it.
Over the past few years, a number of former players have committed suicide after battling depression. Afterwards, they gave their brains to science, and upon examination, they showed telltale signs of CTE. Scientists don't yet have a way of diagnosing CTE for sure besides doing an autopsy. So apart from the 50 deceased former players confirmed to have it, they can only suspect that hundreds more are living with it right now.
9, 7, 8, 4, 3, 2.
9, 7, 8.
76 of 79 deceased NFL players suffered from the degenerative brain disease chronic traumatic encephalopathy. CTE is caused by repeated head trauma where the functioning of the brain is interrupted and nerve cells begin to die. It is associated with memory loss, confusion, impaired judgment, impulse control problems, aggression, depression, and eventually progressive dementia.
I was confined at home for weeks where I couldn't leave unless somebody went with me. I had to learn how to read again. I went through depression, and these major symptoms took nearly 2 years to recover from.
But just the fact that you have dozens and dozens and dozens of players for whom it seemed obvious that they were suffering from these sorts of problems, I think that points to a much larger problem for the NFL.
The congressional hearing was prompted by a study that hinted retired football players may have a higher than normal rate of Alzheimer's disease or other memory problems. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell detailed rules changes and other steps the league has taken to protect players, but he wouldn't acknowledge a link between violent hits and brain diseases.
I just asked you a simple question. What's the answer?
The answer is the medical experts are no better than I would with respect to that. But
with NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, he's under fire for getting caught on camera, apparently laughing about concussions at a black tie dinner. At the same time, the league is defending a $1 billion settlement with former players over thousands of concussions.
Awkward is the word being used to describe this moment.
I had a chance to sit next to the Commissioner of Football, Pete Rozelle, tonight also, and Roger Goodell. I apologize. I had 6 concussions in the NFL.
Lately, it's been difficult to talk about football without mentioning concussions. Why? Well, mounting concern over a disease called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, more commonly known as CTE. In the world of medicine, CTE is a relative newcomer. In football, we just learned about it 10 to 15 years ago. Here's what we can say. It's a progressive degenerative brain disease. It is like Alzheimer's. It can start with memory loss, mood swings, and difficulty in concentration, developing into progressive dementia, even possible thoughts of suicide. But unlike Alzheimer's, CTE can also result in significant aggression and lack of impulse control. The big difference, symptoms tend to begin much earlier in life, closer to your 40s instead of your 60s. In both diseases, there's no known cure. Researchers believe there's only one way to get CTE, and that is repeated hits to the head. What happens is that you get a buildup of an abnormal protein called tau in the brain. Scientists do know both the location of the tau and how much tau in the brain determines the symptoms you might exhibit. But scientists don't yet have a magic number of hits that results in CTE. It also isn't known who exactly would develop CTE. There are some players who take many hits and never develop symptoms. Factors like genetics and age of exposure to the trauma could play a role. How do you know if you have CTE? Just because you have symptoms doesn't mean you have the disease. In fact, as things stand now, you can only be diagnosed for sure after death. Scientists are researching how to diagnose in living people. A prominent group of researchers have found over 90% of former NFL players have developed CTE. But remember something important here. The number could be so high because of something known as selection bias. That means the brains that were studied were from people who worried that they had CTE. Also, it's not just football players that need to be concerned. Boxers, soccer players, people in the military, anyone who's exposed to constant head trauma can develop it too.